Our intention here is to be in a place of presence and stillness together and have that be the primary focus.
I realized our degree of presence determines our external reality. And that was why the only priority that exists is our degree of presence and deepening that.
I am the space that exists around this pain. I am the space that exists around this suffering. I am the space that exists around these thoughts, just this knowing, this feeling that I am loved.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Presence Experiment. I'm Ted, and here are my co-hosts.
I'm Yiting. Hello.
I'm Eniola. Hi.
Welcome. So we're going to be sitting here together, and for anyone listening, I would suggest treating this more like a meditation than you would treat some kind of content or podcast. Our intention here is to be in a place of presence and stillness together and have that be the primary focus. And then secondarily, there may be some things that we talk about. And we hope that at the end of this, you've gotten a sense of the state of consciousness, the energetic field of what we're sitting in here together, more than just specific words. So we would suggest that you listen to this at 1x speed. And if there are pauses, use those as an opportunity to return to your body, return to your breathing. And remember, in whatever way feels natural and comfortable to you, the deeper truth of what you are. So we'll just go into a little bit of getting settled, intention setting meditation here. And then we'll each share some of our personal stories and journeys with this practice. And then we will see what unfolds from there. And again, none of us are professional spiritual teachers or gurus or some unattainable being on a mountaintop. One of the purposes of us recording this is really to demonstrate that presence, awakening, shifts in consciousness don't have to show up as some enormous and dramatic shift in someone's life as they have for many teachers, which is beautiful, but that it's something that can be lived in the messiness of a normal human life. And we hope that in doing so and sharing some of our journey, we can help you to see that you're eligible too. So with that, let's just close our eyes. Take a deep breath, breathing in the air, the presence, the stillness. Letting go of any energy that you brought with you today. And if you're listening to this while driving or something like that, please don't close your eyes. Just join us in stillness. We're not liable for any results of your decision to close your eyes. And just noticing that. So we just started something that we could call a meditation. But that even before we started the meditation, there was already stillness present. the stillness, the deeper truth and reality of our being is not something that we create in meditation. It may feel like that, but that's largely because we're in the habit of always focusing on the contents of the mind and the activities of being a human day to day. And so when the stillness comes into the foreground, it feels like it is the novel state, like it is a new thing entering. When in actuality, it's actually always there, sometimes very deep in the background, but it's always there. And what we hope to share with you today is just a little bit about our personal journeys, shown us this truth more clearly. And so our intention here is just to invite you to join us in this space. And if you feel some of the stillness, we hope you'll join us again in the future. So, deep breath. We can open our eyes. You know, we were thinking of calling this series of recordings, Sacred Inquiry, which describes one aspect of this. And, I do like the name, but I didn't want it to have to be too serious because, I'll share a little bit about my journey. It was very interesting. When I was first deeply exposed to like meditative practice and all that, around when I was, I don't know, 19, 20, I both deeply resonated with it and formed a spiritual ego around it immediately. And so, as soon as I would go into meditation mode, suddenly I'd go from being like a loud, kind of obnoxious human being to being like, okay, let's sit and meditate and come into our bodies, and there's something to be said for, the energy shifts that can happen when one is taking a particular role. But, for me, ultimately, really embodying presence, embodying truth, embodying whatever means embracing all the aspects of my humanness, the deeply spiritual parts that are, can have this immense depth and weight and substance, and the parts of me that are just still that same obnoxious human being that cracks jokes that probably don't go over very well at times and all that. So yeah, I'll just share a bit, right? I mean, I knew about meditation as a kid, I guess through martial arts, but didn't really seriously get into it until probably about age 19, when I was going through a really difficult time in my life. I was struggling with addiction issues and all that, and a lot of trouble with the family. And my mom, in a moment of inspiration, suggested I go stay at a monastery in California run by Thich Nhat Hanh, who I have a photo of here. I still consider him very much my root spiritual teacher. So she suggested I go there over the winter break. And again, it's just fascinating how the universe kind of orchestrates things so that like on one level, I go there and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I want to get enlightened. And then I'm going to be so enlightened and I'm going to tell everyone back at school how they're going to get enlightened. And, it's going to be so amazing. And yet there was absolutely a deep resonance with the state of consciousness there, the peacefulness, the slowing down. Um, Growing up was difficult. There was a lot of dysfunction in the family, but I always kind of had a curiosity about what was going on behind the curtain. Like literally. I was raised Jewish, but we also did Santa Claus. And I remember writing to Santa Claus things like, could I meet God? And like, here's some suggestions for God, and all that. Like, was always curious about like, what is this thing that we find ourselves in here?
You had suggestions for God?
Yeah, I did. Well, I thought that, maybe you shouldn't go to hell forever. Like I feel like even if you're Hitler, like a few million years roasting in the coals, I mean, that should be enough.
I love
you know, yeah, exactly. Proportional. Um, which actually relates to some of the other challenges I've had over the years with spirituality, which is this kind of big focus on condemnation and redemption, which is one of the things that drew me towards Eckhart Tolle's teaching and some of these more open-ended, non-dual type teachings, because often carried this feeling that I was somehow bad, and as I got into the addiction and all that, would behave in ways that seemed to justify that. And that's a whole other story. Yeah, so I had this draw towards spirituality when I encountered the monastery, but wasn't able to really apply it till I got sober at 23, took a bunch of time off from school, and then got involved in recovery work and some spirituality in that sense. And then I was reintroduced to the teaching of Thich Nhat Hanh, this time sober and clear-headed. And it was like just a totally different experience. I mean, it was the same, but it was so much deeper because I was clear-headed. I had done work on myself to clear out a lot of the mental baggage, the egoic baggage that was standing in the way of me seeing the simplicity of the message. And yeah, had a major deepening with that. And that was around the time that I think someone at the monastery, Blue Cliff Monastery in New York, and a friend both recommended I read Eckhart Tolle. So I said, okay, fine, I'll take a look at this Eckhart Tolle, whatever it is. So I got a copy of The Power of Now. And it wasn't the first time I had seen The Power of Now. The first time I'd seen The Power of Now, I was actually at a drug treatment aftercare program, and I saw the book on a shelf. My immediate visceral reaction was, what a bunch of bullshit that sounds like. Was not ready. Then I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years later, probably like, a year and a half, I got it and started reading it. And wow, just the simplicity of the message, the depth of it just suddenly spoke to me. And I read through that. I read through A New Earth. And I think I had one of my kind of first shifts out of the ego while reading A New Earth. It was very brief, but I was reading, there's a passage where he's saying that, there are these egos throughout history, Genghis Khan, Hitler, Stalin, etc. And it was just like, wait a second. This ego thinks its name is Ted, and he's, 25 years old, and da 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 da. And it was just, oh. So there was a little space around it. And then it contracted back in, and I was Ted again and all that. And didn't think much of that for a while. I ended up going back to school and got a bunch of Eckhart's retreats on Audible, which was kind of the best form of meditation I was able to do at that time. I would just sit and listen to retreat in a state of stillness for about, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And that was allowed me to go back and, in addition to other types of spiritual work I was involved in, the recovery community. I did, and I started reading some other spiritual authors too, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Krishnamurti, um, some others that I found to be very beneficial as well. Nisargadatta in particular was very intriguing, though I wasn't fully able to appreciate what he was saying at that point. And then I guess I kind of lapsed into a space where it was like, well, I guess all this awakening stuff, it's great for Eckhart, but, I'm going to be content with kind of gradual progress and all that. And so I was still very much interested in the teaching, but it wasn't till about, I guess, late 2019 when an ex-girlfriend introduced me to Adyashanti. We went to see an event with him at Spirit Rock, and I hadn't heard of him. And it was, I think, my first personal experience with the spiritual teacher who I think had a very deep, personal realization similar to Eckhart's or someone's. And so I decided to go on a retreat with him. And that was a very difficult but profound experience. It didn't have an enormous, big spiritual awakening. I kind of thought I wanted that, but frankly, the times I've encountered, like gotten to the edge of that the last several years, there's been a lot of fear that's arisen. And so there's been an instinctive pulling back. And frankly, I've realized that given my makeup and trauma history and human conditioning and all that, that I'm content with things, just bits of self falling away little by little so that I can kind of digest it rather than having a big, explosive Eckhart Tolle style, everything falls away at once, and then your life is totally shattered for several years while you rebuild it type awakening. But I did experience a shift. Adyashanti was doing a lot of self-inquiry type meditations. Who am I? Who am I? And it would just it started feeling like I was sitting there, and then this other dimension of consciousness would come in and be sitting with me. And it was like there was something else. It wasn't just Ted. And so over the next few years, COVID happened. I got interested. I got introduced to a teacher I began working with one-on-one through my roommate at the Adyashanti retreat. And she was a former student of Eckhart's, and she and I began sitting together regularly. And she was just able to point out something which no amount of recordings could do, which was we could be sitting together. And when we would drop into this place of presence and stillness, she could just point out and say, that's it. Right. Which helped me to start realizing that this state of consciousness, this awakeness, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't have to manifest in some big explosive experience. Those do happen, and I'm not going to claim to be enlightened or realized or anything like that. I'm on this journey, but my sense was at around the time that I went to that Adyashanti retreat, and I did another solo Adyashanti retreat later, that whatever I was going to discover was going to be a deeper experience of what I'd encountered there, but it was not going to be a fundamentally different thing. It wasn't like awakening or truth was different than what I had found, but that there were people who had experienced it more deeply and more transformatively to where it really dislodged more of their personal sense of self. And that's to bring this up to a close so we can hear from Ennie and Yiting. That's kind of been my experience and journey since then. There's been a lot of messy humanness the last few years, a lot of challenges that come up. And more recently, I've been very deeply influenced by Michael Singer's story written in The Surrender Experiment, which I first read the book and thought, well, he sounds like a very conscious guy, but it sounds like a lot of the people I know in 12-step and all that, where like they've become more conscious, but they're still very much in their ego identity and all that. And my teacher encouraged me to, no, look a little more deeply. That actually, he's just very honest about the level of mind activity that he still had on his journey. But he did not take the mind to be himself, and found that at every step in his life journey, life would challenge him in ways that would dislodge a couple more elements of that self concept, that ego concept. And, here I am today. It's a very messy time in some ways. And yet I've experienced that deepening that I encountered, I guess, first really when I had that shift reading A New Earth, and then more deeply with Adyashanti. Again, it's just the same thing that's continuing to deepen and continue to express itself through these other life experiences. And again, the purpose of these recordings is not so much to talk about this. There's a ton of material about what spiritual practice, awakening, whatever you want to call it, is about. But hopefully, if the three of us and guests can share some of our experience encountering this in our daily lives, it'll resonate with that same seed of consciousness in you, and you can join us. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you so much, Ted. Thank you for sharing that. It kind of, I think, at least in my story, if you want to call it that, I feel like there was a similar sort of time period where I felt like you did after Adyashanti, like there was a sort of sense of, okay, I'm on the right path now. It's just about applying it in daily life. And it was like I knew that there was nothing necessarily different that I was still seeking. I was no longer seeking, right? I had already had the realization. And it was just about returning to it again and again in daily life whenever it would lapse. But it never goes away, and it never goes in the other direction. There's always that deepening of consciousness. It's all cumulative. Thank goodness. Yeah.
I was born in Nigeria, and then I grew up Christian. And then in growing up Christian, I went to church. Deep down, I just had this sense or this feeling that I knew that, yes, there was God, but I never felt connected to that being or to God, through the church. So I kind of always went to church, but I just never felt or experienced the connection to God through church. So and I learned about Jesus. And I think his story, out of all of the stories in the Bible, I think his story was the story that resonated the most for me growing up. And that's kind of, so growing up, that's kind of the spirit, or that's how I kind of first learned about like spirituality through religion. So yeah, I was always into like self-help books. So I read like most of like every time I saw like a self-help book that was kind of pointing towards like improving oneself or just being better, I picked it up and read. And it's because I was always looking, there's just something in me that was looking for something, right, in that direction. So yeah, and then I moved to Canada for my master's degree. And then I think I started listening to podcasts. There's this guy called Tim Ferriss. I probably listened to a bit of Tim Ferriss. When Joe Rogan was Joe Rogan, I used to listen to Joe Rogan. But like these people kind of, I guess, so they kind of used to touch on, I guess maybe, probably Tim Ferriss. I don't know. In that space, I probably heard of something like a meditation, right? Like just from listening to podcasts in that space. So, and when I heard about meditation, it was kind of like, oh, like if you meditate, it helps you like be, you know centered, grounded. It helps your memory, helps you be calm. I was like, oh, I love this, because I was always into self-help. So right, I was like, yes, this sounds like something I want to do. So I think I downloaded like Headspace. Then I used to practice meditation with Headspace. I used to practice it, but I didn't really, but it wasn't, I didn't really get it, but I just used to do it, right? Um, and then fast forward a couple of years later, um, I think I also stumbled across the power of now somewhere along my journey. And similar to you, Ted, I listened to I started listening to them. I'm like, yeah, it just it didn't resonate. And I just kind of closed the audiobook, right? Um, and then some years down the line, I experienced heartbreak. So I I was just devastated. Like my heart was like broken. I was in pain. And then
How
I
old
went
were you
on.
at this time?
How old was I? In my 20s, probably 20, 22, 23. Not sure. Yeah, probably in my 20s, like mid 20s. And then, so I went online just searching for answers, right? Went to Reddit, searching Reddit, just trying to find something to kind of help me relieve that pain of the heartbreak I was experiencing. Um, and then I think along the way, I saw someone recommended, oh, the power of now. One of, I don't know what post, but I was like, okay, let me check out this book again. Cause like, I had read it like a year before. It didn't resonate. And I think this was during COVID. Yeah. So this was during COVID. And then I started reading it again. And oh, wow. Like it just, it changed my life. And then I watched a bunch of Eckhart videos on YouTube, and like I think that the main thing that really resonated with me was like, I am not my thoughts. And I think I was at home one day and I had a thought that, oh, I want to go to the bathroom. And I saw that thought.
Mm.
Normally it's like, okay, I want to go to the bathroom. I just stand up, go to the bathroom. And then I had that thought, and then I saw the thoughts, and I was like, oh, wow, that was the first time that I had experienced like the realization that, you know, there's the I and there are thoughts that,
Mm.
are present in that space.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and then from then on, I think that's my first. I think that moment was my first awakening, and from then on, I just went deep into like um, practicing. Actually, not practicing. I watched a bunch of like Eckhart videos, Ramdas, and I discovered Ramdas, Alan Watts. So yeah, I was just listening and listening, and it was like I was remembering. It was like every time these beings spoke, it was like I was remembering, and like it was like I was like, for the first time in in this form's life, it felt like I was speaking to myself. I felt like I knew everything they were saying, because like they were speaking in something in me that was true. Like everything they were saying was true. It felt true. I knew that yeah, like this, I may appear as this form, right? Everything may appear real, like this earth or the things we see around, they look real, but like reality is actually the background or the space in which all of this is appearing. All of this is just kind of like they're like objects in that reality. Anyways, sorry, I was about to digress, but I learned like I think from then on I just realized that the beingness. And then I think I started practicing more, like meditating more. And every time I meditated, I went deep within. I just experienced myself as just space. Like I could see my thoughts, I could hear sounds, I could feel my body, but like there was something behind that. There was something just empty. That was all of this was happening around. And the more I went deep into that, the more it just felt peaceful. It just felt like this is my true nature, right? Um, and yeah, I was in bliss like all those years. Like that period, I was just in bliss. I was just like, it was amazing because I think prior to that, because I forgot to mention, I also had a challenging childhood. I struggled a lot with like my form and how I looked and thinking I wasn't good enough, I wasn't lovable, I wasn't um yeah, like I didn't know what love meant, right? And I struggled with all these things, and like seeing that realization and seeing that, oh wow, like um yeah, I am love. um the space that I am, the being that I am, um is love. And I saw all of this, like I think that realization, I honestly, I can't even explain it. Just that realization, just like it helped me step into this place of peace and knowing, um, and yeah, and all of those, like Eckhart would call them pain bodies or like insecurities, or they kind of just step back, and all that like remained was just this knowing or this feeling that I am, yeah, I am love, honestly. um and I think after that I attended an Eckhart retreat, I think, where I met you guys, Eating and Ted, with my now partner. um and I think Kim, she gave a talk, and I think one of the talks she referenced, I've forgotten the person who wrote this book, but I think the title of the book was After the Ecstasy.
Except
The
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 laundry.
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 Uh-huh.
Jack
Uh-huh.
Cornfield.
Jack Confield, yes, yes, yes. And I was like, like in my mind, like, I'm like, for me, like, it doesn't feel like there's any like, exactly in my mind, like, my mind was like, it doesn't feel like this. Like, I feel like yeah, I feel like this ecstasy is always going to be like forever. I feel like I have awakened, and all of the laundry has just kind of dissolved in that bliss. So anyways, got back, and the laundry actually began. And then I think I got married shortly after that. And yeah, I then started to, you know, realize my I just started to realize, like, oh wow, that in me there still exists, like, even though I day to day I was, in this blissful state, in me there still existed, the pain body, like there still existed um fears, there still existed all of this like shadowy things, right? And having so like and a lot of these things were triggered, for example, in my relationship or with my family. I think those were like the primary relationships that kind of really triggered in me like these pain bodies. And I'm so grateful because they allowed me to see these things. Because before I wouldn't, because I kind of had bypassed those things, right? It's like I had just said, oh, okay, now I am awakened. I don't need like my past is like there's like I'm just in the now. Exactly, I'm just in. While that is true, there still exists, things like the pain body, things like the shadow, things like the dark side that we, sometimes refuse to look at. Fears, right? Those still existed in me. And being able to like look at those, being able to shine light on those, being able to like embrace and accept, look at the child within me, heal that child, heal the traumas that I experienced, love and not just love, you know, not just love, not just send love to myself, but also like the other beings that maybe caused hurt to me. Also see, and I think I was able to have compassion and see that, yeah, a lot of times, we it's unconsciousness that causes another to hurt another, right? It's unconsciousness or unawareness of the fact that we are one. That's why the ego does the things it does. Um, and yeah, so I think after that retreat, my laundry started. I was in a job. I used to work as a software engineer, and I think I one day I just knew that I needed to like leave. Um, and I left that job. And after leaving the job, because I just felt this, I just felt this pull that like I wasn't supposed to be here anymore. I was supposed to be doing something else, right? But I I didn't know what that thing was going. I didn't know what next to be doing, and yeah, I feel lost because like I feel like I don't know what my purpose is anymore. Like because like I was kind of going following the script of like the our modern day society, like go to school, you know, graduate, get a job, get married, and now I kind of left one of those institutions, right? And it just feels like, okay, what do I do now? But amazingly enough, I think before I was leaving, I knew that okay, I, the knowing was I was going to leave this job, but then I was going to just go be right. I was just going to be like I just need to just sit in silence, just be, go into nature and just be and then see what comes out of that, right? So that was the plan. Um so I was doing that, like different things came up, different anxieties, and then I had to experience all of those and let them go. Um, and as all of this is happening, I still was practicing being in the now, practicing, whenever my pain body is triggered, like the mind does this thing, it's like it's having a conflict with someone else in the mind. Like the conflict isn't happening, but it's happening in the mind. And then, I was able to like, watch all of this happening, right? And the more I was able to do all of that, the more I was able to still come back to the moment, still come back to presence, right? I I just found the presence deepening. I felt lighter. I can't explain it. I just felt just more empty, right? Less and less the mind became quieter. And yeah. And so then during that time, and then I got pregnant. And it was interesting. The most challenging, the most challenging thing I've ever experienced. And yeah, and I think during that period, I then was actually able to do what I felt like I needed to do after I left my job, which is actually just sit and be. So during that period, I went a lot into nature, just being, just sitting, just being one with the now. Um, and because it was very challenging physically, you know, there are times where like I couldn't even just be present. I had to just run away into complaining or crying. And then, but like I was still able to come back and just see that. And I think then I wasn't able to see because I was always, the mind was always questioning why, because it was so much physical pain, right? And that pain or physical discomfort kind of leads to suffering, right? And my mind was always questioning why, but I never got any answers. I think the only answers I got was just, I just needed to be present in all these moments. So that happened. I gave birth to my child, and now, and then the postpartum, which was another interesting period. But I think the point I'm trying to make is like, in all of this happening, like it was very challenging. Like I've gone through like a bunch of like challenging things in this past year. But in the midst of all of this, I still was able to find peace. Even if like I was going through something, I was still able to like find peace in the midst of it, in the midst of the suffering. I was still able to find peace. And this only happened because like every time I brought myself back to my breath, back to my body, and just grounding or rooting in the moment, and just knowing that this too shall pass. Like nothing is permanent. Like every moment passes, everything passes. That's the one of the truths of life, is like everything is impermanent. um and even one day my form would also pass, right? And knowing those truths kind of just helped me, yeah, just in the challenging times I was able to just find peace and find gratitude, right? Like these times are helping me to see that life is not here. We're not here to, I think Eckhart says this, life is not here to make us happy. Life is not supposed to be, oh, just like joy rise, right? Life is here to wake us up. It's here to awaken us. Like in the midst of those suffering, right? I was able to still see that I am this space that exists around this pain. I am the space that exists around this suffering. I'm the space that exists around this feeling or these thoughts. And um yeah, I think that's kind of been my journey. Yeah, and it's been amazing. It really is. I think being a human being is, it's such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I think the purpose of our existence, the purpose of my existence, the purpose of your existence is for us to get to this point of realization that, you know, we we are we are this nothing. We are this, like, it's even hard to describe what that thing is. But the only way we find out is by going within. Like, the only way we see what we are is by going within, and by seeing what we are not, which is, we think we are our forms, right? We think that we are, or I used to think I was, okay, Eniola, I was this form, I was X number of years old, or I am Nigerian, or I was Nigerian. All of that is true. That's relatively true. But what's absolutely true is that I am. I am here. I am now. You are here. You are now. We are present, right? And this moment is all that exists. And this is what we are. This is who we are. Um, and yeah, that's yeah, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you so much for sharing. Mm.
As someone who met you on that 2022 retreat, you were positively beaming there. I mean, there's a lot of people who come to these retreats, and we were all at different places. But I remember walking by you after one of the Eckhart talks, and you were just radiating this bliss and love energy, which was very cool to witness.
Yes. And you still do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I can really just see how that period that you were just in bliss and deepening awakening, like it carries forth like every day, I think. And at the same time, of course, for I'll just say for new mommy things like no awards for suffering. We don't give out medals for suffering. So also, yes, do need support and a village and help, everything like that too.
Mothers, I think that the mother role it's a powerful role. It really is a powerful role, and you're right, it's a role that needs support. And I think in the new earth, honoring the feminine, honoring the mother, honoring the divine female, I think it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Because I sense that has been put down for a while. That has been um, devalued. I think it's important to bring balance back and um, yeah, and honor
Yes.
the mother and the father. I think there needs to be a balance in the yin and the yang.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes, that's some of what we are here to work on together. Yeah. We don't reward it monetarily, and we don't reward it, and not just, of course, being a biological, part of that, but just the caregiving and all of that work that it takes to the teaching, teachers. I mean, just yeah, well, we'll need balance in order to be able to survive as humanity. So that's why some of this work to bring in presence into everyday life is so critical.
Agreed.
So I When Annie suggested that we talk about our personal journeys into presence and application of presence, it was just like, wow, oh my goodness, of course. Like we so have to share this because of what Ted had mentioned. We just are wanting to be little individual examples and lights and in a sea of light, and so um, to see if we can remove some of the well, this isn't the mind's thoughts, like, well, this isn't something I can do and practice in everyday life because I've got too much to do. I've got too much going on. When that settles down, like, oh, okay, I can do it. But so yeah, I had a long period of, I think, a very long period of doing that all the time. But uh I think that, at first I was going to share that like my process kind of started at in my like mid 20s when my it was actually a previous um, uh, significant other that shared like all of these teachings with me, and I still am sending. I always like kind of intermittently send him just gratitude and warmth when I think of it, and because it has been so life changing for me. But then I realized, like, well, it started, of course, with just my difficult childhood. It's funny because it's like the third person of three of us, three out of three who said that. But yeah, I mean, I guess like for me, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not maybe the right time to go completely into that, but just to say that I had a very challenging childhood with my family members, and I really clearly felt like there was enough like suffering for a lifetime by the time I was 18 years old. And so I don't know, I just like made it through. That was just about survival. And I did that. And then in my, yeah, like start of medical school, um, I went to volunteer in Ethiopia and had always been wanting to go to, countries in Africa, and was really passionate about global health inequalities. And that's what kind of led me initially into medicine. And that's where I experienced like just so much. It was the peaceful mountains of Western Ethiopia, so much greenery and peacefulness, and the people there were just happy, and it was a huge culture shock coming back to the States from that. um, and and that's when I didn't know what it was, but I just experienced this peacefulness. um, and it was, yeah, I guess it was quick to to change when I returned, but um, it was a major, definitely a major experience, just from a on the level of form too, to learn about a different world. And um, so then I started to ask like some of life's big questions. I just started to wonder about that. I had always been really into self help growing up as a child. I was a big Oprah fan, and I would, have yeah, like a lot of feeling alone as a child, and like those types of teachers. I was really interested in some of, especially like the spiritual teachers that she would bring on. And so I was searching for those answers around my mid 20s when I met this person, and then he taught me about meditation, transcendental meditation in particular. About, we watched, What the Bleep Do We Know, a great movie documentary. I'm not sure what to call it. and then the audiobooks for Eckhart, A New Earth, was the first one, and then that was really good for me because I felt like I needed that to be able to get into Power of Now. And it really definitely became foundational to my life right away. But it wasn't like an everyday thing that I would actually be able to be present. It would be, the snippets of my day when I would have the meditation and when I would have great time to do the meditation, which wasn't always. And so it wasn't a real application, but even though I knew it was foundational to my life, it was like a funny thing. So, so I just had, yeah, a lot of continued suffering, I would say, challenges throughout. There's 9 years of training after college for my job, my specialty. And so there were a lot of, yeah, challenging people, I would say, some, different levels of emotional abuse, perhaps. And so, yeah, but, um, I never thought to necessarily apply presence to it. It's kind of funny thinking back. I don't know. And then I went to a spiritual retreat, actually an Eckhart retreat. It was in Lake Louise, and um, that was really a major deepening during the retreat. But then I came back and was in my challenging work. Now I had thankfully finished that 9-year training, but I was in challenging work, and um, yeah, I didn't necessarily carry it forward, but I could sense that there was that deepening from that. And then um, I I really just felt like during 2019 that I needed to switch up my work situation. It wasn't, I was starting to burn out, even though I had only been, I know the training was so long, the 9 years, but then I had only been a couple years out of that and already feeling burned out. And I just felt that's not normal. So I sought some, other ways to support myself. I started to do travel work, and that allowed me some more time freedom. But then uh, this was 2019, so COVID happened right after that. And so skipping forward, I had signed up for a retreat, and that got pushed back for like years until 2022 was the retreat that I met you guys. Um, that was wonderful, and it really I met Annie briefly, but Ted and I and this other like group of attendees, I think we really built some community. And then I happened to just have a travel assignment to the Bay Area, and so this community kind of was able to continue for me. And then very shortly after, I sensed very clearly when I have the notification about another retreat, but specifically on teaching presence, that I had to go to that one. And so, it wasn't like I felt like I had a choice. So I had to go to that one. And that somehow, this, whether it was in quick succession, it was only 6 months between the retreats. And it just further reminded me. So after the 2022 retreat, I realized our degree of presence determines our external reality. And that was why the only priority that exists is our degree of presence and deepening that. And that's what, Eckhart expressed. And I just had a transformative realization from that and started to realize I had to apply that presence that was really maybe the first time that I started to prioritize my degree of presence in everyday life. And just thinking about it as a practice in daily life allowed me to simply just going back into it whenever I had the realization, and throughout my day, just going about my day. And so then that sort of calling type, not sure what to call it, but that message to go to the becoming a teacher retreat happened. And then there was something perhaps about all of that that just it was like there was no going back. I had gone to a retreat, and then I would go back, but there was no going back now. So um, I had been applying presence for years, for a couple years now since then, and just uh, in that process, I'll have little snippets of like pushes and pulls, like physical sensations of the body, or messages that I hear very clearly. After the 22 retreat, again, I received a very clear message. You need to do a tiding process. It's called the Marie Kondo tiding process, which to me is really the application of presence into our material world that surrounds us. And so I had done it many times before, but then I knew that I needed to do it with that degree of presence that I had from after the retreat. I did that. And then one day, just while showering, I received this clear message as if someone were speaking out loud to me: create a conscious community around investing. And right away, I knew what that meant. I had been, ever since what happened in 2019 and then COVID, I had been working on my investing journey and my sense of abundance versus scarcity um, pretty intensely, with basically 100% of my free time. I just became very passionate about it. And I was pursuing the investing. In this case, it was in real estate, and very intensively, to the point that the snippet that kind of gets talked about is I acquired 28 units in 2 years. And it was through so much there was so much suffering around that. There was so much grind, but also just so many lessons that were taught to me through that. And I just, of the realities of the difficulties of managing from far away, and also of just the messiness of people's lives, and managing and not getting taken advantage of, which I did several times by people that were local, that were my local team, and not really realizing it for a long time, because I was doing the out of state strategy. And so I had been pursuing this financial freedom without financial ease, and it was just it was a roller coaster of emotions, and I was doing it on my own. I had a business partner, but it was still, I wasn't part of a team. I wasn't, in a partnership personally. And it was, yeah, I could see that when my ego wanted to achieve that level of financial, it was really going after financial ease, but it thought it needed just financial, freedom. And through all of that brought on more suffering, because of, it was just what I was led to do, to go after that mind-made goal of financial freedom, brought on more suffering. And so when in 2022, I had already kind of gone through that portion of it, and I had that realization that was finally about the application, that's when I just saw, wow, okay, I've been approaching all of this journey, the investing journey, wrong. And finally, I started to develop, especially with that message that I received to create a conscious community around investing, I started to develop a curriculum, if you will, on conscious investing. And what does that mean to apply presence in investing, using investing really just as a practice, as a vehicle to teach presence. And so what came through was portions of a book, and then I was interviewed on a real estate podcast, and it was it felt like I needed to bring that message of abundance and financial ease into communities that were either frustrated about the financial world, or they were really maybe coming from the presence community, but not quite understanding how to bring about abundance in terms of reflecting that in our material world. So I was pursuing that for a while, and then well, 2024, a US election happened, and then 2025 followed. And so when that happened, it just made it more clear to me. I had other pulls and messages clearly indicating to me that I needed to be pointedly concentrating on presence and just the application of it, not only within investing as a vehicle for the application, but in general, and spreading this understanding just of the need for presence in daily life actually applied, and building community from that. So that's what led us here. Yeah.
Thank you, Yiting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Love your story and how that you have just been following your intuition at each step.
Yeah, we're always receiving guidance, and it's incredible how often it is. Once I started to practice applying presence, this natural, I didn't even know that I would be receiving guidance so much as the other component of it. It just, I would always wonder about decision making, and nowadays I don't even decide. I'm just in the flow, and I'm just aligned much of the time. Not always, but it could be something that's just turn here, and then I avoid a closed road for some reason, or any number of, or a life-changing message like the ones that I've received that have directed me in along a totally different path. But and I've accepted that it's always evolving. There was a period that I had received a message about purchasing a business, and I had taken this walk, and it was at this walkable area, and I felt, wow, this is a special experience, and I was looking for something like that for a little while, and then it actually led to my being an escrow on that business, and everything completely falling apart, like a dumpster fire level, just implosion. And then I had some like verbal and different attacks from the owner that I was going to purchase it from, and it led me down this other path of my childhood, and processing through that even more, because I had processed that pointedly through working on my healing some time ago. And it just from that business perspective helped me to kind of see what I had subconsciously thought was I needed to create this, flowering of an existing business because it's always easier, think theoretically, right? That's what we're taught. It's always in business that it's easier to purchase a business than to create your own. And so I there was some subconscious aspect of me that thought I needed to make this successful before I could actually embark on a consciousness involved business, which was ultimately what I wanted to do anyway. And when it imploded, I knew that right away that the universe was doing it for me. I mean, thank goodness I didn't purchase that business. My goodness. And that I was led to that realization through that path. I was led to this wrong path, but of course it wasn't wrong all along. It was just that I had to get a different lesson from it than what I thought.
So just take a conscious breath. And then you were saying something?
I was just saying that it's interesting, like the lessons that we learn, either during or after, like, yeah, just the lessons that life or consciousness brings our way. It always just points to back to the same thing, which is like to listen within, right? For me, like it always just points back to like just come back, like being present, to be honest, like being present, or sometimes points to love. All of this, like, things are supposed, like, it's we should be grateful for these things, right? Like those things, those hard, challenging things are supposed to like wake us up. That's the point. Like, wake us up to the fact that like we are not, because like those challenging things really causes pain, suffering for the ego, for the mind, and it's supposed to allow the mind or the ego to wake up and see that, oh, okay, I I'm something else. Like, I'm not this, all of these things that like I think I am. It's not who I am. Like, if I just be still, if I just still my mind, I'm able to see and go within. I'm able to see the light, the depth, and like the stillness within. And then these challenges, they kind of transform from like challenges to just happenings, right? Okay, like your baby is crying. Okay, I'm just present with the baby. Okay, I have an illness, I have pain. I'm just present with that pain. I'm just present with the headache or the stomach pain or the leg pain. Okay, I have no money. Okay, I it's fine. Okay, do I need to go get a job? Do I need to ask someone to please give me $20 to buy something like to eat? But like, I don't have to, you know, I don't have to suffer anymore. And even in all these challenges, I can still be at peace. I can still experience, because peace, happiness, joy, they are our true nature. Like, happiness doesn't come from outside, right? It's not like, okay, when I buy this fancy car, when I have like $20 million, then I'll be so happy. I'll be so, that happiness starts from, it actually comes from somewhere within. And I think the point of spiritual practice is to help you find, like, exactly find that happiness, find that joy, find that peace within, so that when whenever life throws at you, whatever is happening, you are still able to know that who you really are, and able to experience, not just even know, experience that who you really are is consciousness. And yeah, and even in the face of death, even in the face of death, even because that's the thing, the fear of death is the ultimate fear. That's kind of the root fear, where every other fear kind of stems out from. And like that realization, you even see that even death doesn't touch that, because you also know that you can never die, right? Because like who you are isn't, it's deathless. Like we are the rays of sunshine. We are the fruits of God. We are the truth. Like we are the fruits of the divine being, right? And yeah, and I sense that, yeah, all of these, and it's in our day-to-day lives. Like every human being, we all have our own curriculums. Like we all have our, like no one's life is perfect. No one's life is like suffering free. I think it's very easy to see someone else, even Eckhart, like it's very easy to see Eckhart and think, oh yeah, he has a perfect life. No one knows what he goes to, because I think he recently had like cancer diagnosis, right? You never, like, exactly, like we all go through pain, we all go through suffering, but it's part of the curriculum. I don't know why, right? Like sometimes I question consciousness of God, like, oh, like why don't we just like why don't you just calm remembering, right? Why don't you just like yeah, well, I guess I honestly I don't know why, but I sense that yes, like the suffering is the past. Like the challenges of being a human, right, is one of the paths to um realizing that we are, yeah, that we exist.
And in the
So,
midst of that, my mind is like, "Wah, wah." like, but it sucks. It sucks. It sucks to be, you know, stressed out or like hungry or in pain
mhm.
or any get scared of nothing's wrong, but I'm just scared of what could be wrong. So, yeah.
To say, especially nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of justified things to be afraid of. But, in recovery circles, they talk a lot about the danger of justified anger, forming resentment, and then you live your whole life in resentment. And especially if you struggle with addiction, very often the resentment will lead you to pick up the addiction again. But justified fear has a similarly corrosive effect. Like, oh my God, there's reason to be afraid. Sure, but when things are as challenging and precarious as they can be, at least on the form level right now, do I want to revert to my reptile brain, the most primitive part of my consciousness, to address the situation? Or do I actually want to be able to see from this holistic place that recognizes the reality of the human experience? That I'm in this form that can be harmed, that can experience great pain, that can experience great loss. If something happens to me or a loved one, like, not to deny any of that, but that also is so large that it can contain all of that without having to panic about it. Because, as one teacher I work with said to me recently, right, like, it's important to recognize that we are human. We're not just human. Because if we're just human, I, I don't know how anyone can do it in the world. I mean, no wonder that we were so nihilistic and narcissistic and overwhelmed and everything, because there's just simply no way to do it if the complete extent of who and what you are is the individual person, then you're so fragile.
Mm. I've been practicing, in showing empathy without making that concern real in someone's, mind. And a lot of it is just quiet spaciousness and just holding space, no words. But if someone is complaining or is sharing their fears with me, um, and that's part of my job is to be there when that happens. Yeah, just to be. And then reflecting on that, I mean, I can practice a lot of the same thing for myself, like when my fears arise and I watch that and just to be instead of having to seek out like someone that can just reinforce that that's so real thing. But yeah.
Having shared our personal stories, what's like one or two lessons that have been very valuable to us, that if there was some way we could have known them at the beginning of our journey, would have been wonderful. Obviously, everything unfolds at exactly the time it is needed. So there's no way I could have gone back to Ted when he was 18 and been like, here's what you need to know. It just wouldn't have worked. But
Yeah.
what's something that you feel that you've learned through bitter experience, that, or a couple things?
So for me, it's just bring presence in every moment. Like every second, every moment is an opportunity to bring in presence. Um, if I am washing the dishes, if I'm like I just feel the water on my hands, I feel the soap, I feel myself like scrubbing the plates. If I am feeding my child, I am just like looking at him. I am just experiencing that moment. If I'm about to sleep, I am just like feeling my body, feeling my breath. Just every moment, like I remember I just used the opportunity to just bring in presence, and like it just seems like even those little tiny things, they kind of add up, they add up. And I think the second other big thing for me was nature. I forgot to mention this during my when I was sharing. I think nature really showed me the truth of oneness. Like every time I was in that space, every time I was amongst like the trees, the birds, I could feel the breeze, the air on my skin. I could see like the lake, how peaceful, like everything just was just perfect. Everything is perfect in nature. And then I could see that perfection is in me also. Like I am doing, like I am in this moment, I am experiencing this perfection, which is nature. Um, so yeah, I think those are the two biggest like lessons or practices, to be fair. I think those are the two practices I really apply in my life. It's like every moment is an opportunity to be present, and yeah, and just being going into nature as often as as I can. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Annie. think the big thing I would say is just kind of trust the process, right? It's messy. Being human is difficult, right? I mean, and there's no way to sidestep that. And as Eckhart says, right, my degree of presence has a lot to do with the types of situations and challenges I tend to find myself in life. And yet, life is still going to be challenging. And yet, the paradox of it for me that I've been really grappling with lately, if I can accept that there's some level of difficulty, that acceptance actually makes it a lot easier. Right? It's the resisting, it's the saying, no, I don't want it. I want to be in the bliss all day. Creates the grasping. Then it moves like I'm sitting here right now and I can feel there's the peace in the background and there's some agitation in my system and the mind is coming up with some narratives. And if I just allow that humanness to be there, okay, this is what's being worked through in this moment. It's not a problem, right? But if I identify with that energy, that movement of consciousness, and take it to be everything about me and that everything it's saying is totally true, then I'm stuck. And yeah, so can I just trust that I'm right where I need to be and have the humility to recognize too, like when life brings up some challenge or like I start thinking, oh, I'm so enlightened, and then I do something stupid. But that's actually life trying to help me. It's life reminding you, no, you're still a messy human. You may have insight that is valuable and have experienced some things that are valuable. But as they say in recovery circles, right? I'm also just another bozo on the bus. So
I really second and third everything that you guys just said. I think these are yes, very, very good pointers. I would say giving myself grace. So similar to maybe Ted's, that just the more that I see myself as the human parts of me, and as I've deepened presence, I've just been accepting more and more of myself. And part of that is accepting the mind's complaints and the mind's just chiding myself, and seeing those as an observer rather than believing in it has helped. And then the excuses of the mind, right? That, well, to gotta get through the day before I can be present, then afterwards I can relax and be present. It's just a trick. It's just the mind's trick. And no practice is necessarily the golden practice. Like, you can even let go of meditation if you bring in deep presence into doing the dishes and doing the laundry, and that 95% of the time that we should be in enjoyment, right, versus acceptance some much smaller percentage of the time, versus enthusiasm, also of a smaller percentage of the time, since that's difficult to sustain. Enthusiasm for doing laundry and chores, but be in enjoyment and just practicing that when things are going smoothly and you're just doing your chores. That can be all it is, and then that deepening of presence makes the actual difficult times that much more just, you're able to move through them, and then you end up through that practice enjoying 95% of your life. And isn't that what this is all about? So
Thank you so much, guys.
thank you so much.
A conscious breath and bring this session to a close. So just each of us transmitting love and goodwill and all kinds of blessings, and also an ability to not take ourselves so seriously to everyone in the world, anyone who's suffering, anyone who's listening to this or needs to listen to this. Just close with a big conscious breath. So Eckhart said, several conscious breaths a day is better than doing 10 or 20 minutes of meditation. So,
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be with you.
thank you.